Okay, let's kick things off. We're about to dive into a material that, well, you probably don't think about every day, but it's absolutely fundamental. We're talking silicon red brass.
Yeah, it's one of those high performance alloys, really crucial, where you need something tough, something that resists harsh conditions.
Exactly. And we've got a market outlook report here as our guide. It tracks this specific market, starting back in 2021 and looking all the way forward to 2033.
So, our plan really is to unpack the data, pull out the key insights,
Right.
try and understand what's really driving the growth and shaping things globally for this stuff.
Right, because the applications are pretty critical. We're talking marine uses,
Mhm.
corrosion,
Big one there, yeah.
complex mechanical engineering where you need strength and precision, and then maybe the most familiar for many people, plumbing systems.
Its specific properties just make it, well, ideal for those challenges.
And the big picture from this report, it looks like really solid expansion. I mean, the global market was already valued at, what, over $12.5 billion back in 2021?
Right.
And it's projected to go past 21 billion by 2033. That's pretty significant growth for what sounds like a niche material.
It really is. It points to the sustained fundamental demand. It's rooted in global development, really.
Okay, so let's dig into those numbers. Understand the tech side of this material, the economics pushing it, and how it looks region by region.
Sounds good. So, globally first, the report definitely confirms that steady upward climb you mentioned. It started at $12,543.5 million dollars in 2021.
Okay, just over 12.5 billion.
Right. Then it rose to 14,958.3 million by 2025. And the forecast it takes it up to 21,272.3 million by 2033.
Wow. So from where we are now, adding almost another 7 billion in value in what, less than a decade?
Precisely. And that works out to a compound annual growth rate, a CGR of 4.5% over that forecast period.
4.5%.
Yeah. And what's important there isn't just the total value, it's the consistency, That rate suggests it's not some boom and bust thing. It's steady, predictable growth driven by, well, fundamental needs.
Okay, so what are those fundamental needs then? What's behind this constant demand, specifically for silicon red brass?
Well, the report mainly points to increasing global infrastructure development. So think big construction projects, utility upgrades, industrial
Like
plants.
the big stuff.
Yeah. And alongside that, you've got growing industrialization. That's happening in developed countries expanding, but also really significantly in emerging markets building up their industrial base. Both need reliable, durable materials.
And that's where this specific alloy comes in. Why is silicon red brass? Why not something else? What makes its properties so valuable here?
That's the key, isn't it? The demand really stems from its superior performance, especially when conditions get tough. Its excellent corrosion resistance is probably number one.
Especially for plumbing and marine uses, I imagine.
Absolutely. Exposure to water, particularly salt water, would just eat away at other materials much faster. That leads to leaks, failures.
Like that dezinsification you hear about with some older brass plumbing.
Exactly that. Silicon red brass alloys are much better at resisting that kind of attack. And that means, longer life, less maintenance, more safety in critical systems.
Makes sense.
Plus, it's got high strength, so it handles pressure well in engineering, and it has good machinability, basically. It's easy to shape into complex parts efficiently. These aren't just abstract benefits, they solve real problems in engineering and infrastructure.
Okay, that gives us the global picture. Steady growth, infrastructure, and industry driving it, and the materials' technical strengths are key. So let's zoom in a bit. How does this play out regionally? The report flags North America as a major player.
Oh, absolutely. A definite leader. The numbers show North America starting at $4,691.3 million dollars in 2021.
Okay.
That climbs to $5,564.5 million in 2025, and the projection hits a pretty substantial $8,062.2 million by 2033.
And within that, the U.S. takes the lion's share, right, given its industrial size and infrastructure.
That's right. The U.S. is the single biggest national market in the report. It grew from about $3.5 billion dollars in 2021, that's $3,499.7 million, dollars to $4,134.4 million in 2025, and it's expected to reach nearly $6 billion, $5,958 million by 2033. It's just a massive market, constantly needing this material for everything from city water systems to factories.
And Canada and Mexico chip in significantly too, though maybe not on the U.S. scale.
Correct. Canada shows really strong growth, too. It went from $877.3 million in 2021, heading towards $1,062.8 million in 2025. and projected to hit almost $1.6 billion, $1,596.3 million in 2033.
Cool.
And Mexico also sees consistent growth, started at $314.3 million, moving to $367.3 million in 2025, and forecast around $507.9 million by 2033.
All right, let's hop across the Atlantic. Europe, also a pretty substantial market, I gather.
Definitely. The report puts Europe at $3,110.8 million back in 2021. That expands to $3,664.8 million in 2025, and the expectation is it reaches $5,105.3 million by 2033, so over $5 billion.
And what's driving it specifically in Europe? Any particular trends highlighted?
Yeah, here the report talks about innovation in engineering sectors and also a really strong push for sustainable construction practices.
Ah,
So that often means favoring durable, long-lasting materials like silicon red brass because, they need less replacing, less maintenance. It aligns well with those green building goals.
looking at the countries. Germany obviously stands out,
Yeah.
manufacturing powerhouse.
Germany's the biggest in Europe, according to this data. It's projected to grow from $796.4 million in 2021 to $923.5 million in 2025, and then hit...
This audio was created with Podcastle.ai.
$923.5 million in 2025, and then hit $1,271.2 million by 2033.
So over 1.2 billion.
Yep. And the UK and France aren't far behind, relatively speaking, similar drivers industry and construction. The UK market is forecast to reach $847.5 million by 2033. That's up from about $494.6 million in 21.
Okay.
And France, it started at $522.6 million, expected to grow to $893.4 million in that same time frame.
What about further south or east in Europe?
Well, Italy is another key market, shows solid growth, aiming for around $561.6 million by 2033, starting from $304.9 million in 2021.
Right.
Russia and Spain are also mentioned, but with more moderate growth compared to, say, Germany or France. Russia is projected at $285.9 million by 2033, and Spain around $265.5 million.
Now, this is interesting. The report flags Luxembourg. Tiny country, but apparently seeing rapid growth.
Yeah, that one jumps out, doesn't it? It starts really small, just $56 million in 2021, but it's projected to hit $132.7 million by 2033.
Wow, more than doubling.
Exactly. That kind of percentage leap suggests something quite specific is happening there. Maybe some high-end construction or specialized engineering projects, maybe a particular type of manufacturing that uses a lot of this alloy. It shows how even smaller economies can really punch above their weight in these niche material markets.
That's a great point. Shows how the big trends hit different places differently.
For sure. And then the rest of Europe, all the other countries combined, they add another chunk, forecast to hit about $520.7 million by 2033.
Okay, let's shift focus to Asia Pacific, often seen as the engine of global growth.
Yeah.
How does silicon red brass fit in there?
Well, the report definitely identifies Asia Pacific as a particularly fast-growing area for this market, mirroring those broader economic trends you mentioned. The market size there is expected to expand quite significantly. It was $2,834.8 million in 2021,
Okay.
and it's projected to reach $4,956.4 million by 2033. Nearly $5 billion.
And the drivers there must be pretty strong. Industrialization, infrastructure.
Absolutely, and maybe even more pronounced. The report links this growth directly to the sheer scale of industrial advances and, crucially, those massive infrastructure investments across the region. New cities, huge transport networks, expanding factories, they all need foundational materials like this.
And I'm guessing China leads the charge regionally.
No surprise there. China is the dominant force, projected to grow from $12,221.9 million in 2021 to a really commanding $2,208.1 million by 2033. Just the scale of development there demands huge amounts of these materials.
Over 2.2 billion just in China?
Yeah.
How do other key players in Asia stack up? Japan, India.
Well, Japan is more of a mature economy, but it's still a substantial and steady market, forecast to reach about $802.7 million by 2033. But India, that's where you see really rapid expansion, maybe mirroring China's earlier trajectory. It jumps from $275.5 million in 2021 to a projected $543.6 million by 2033.
Nearly doubling.
Yeah, that surge really points to significant infrastructure build-out and industrial growth happening there right now.
And other fast developing areas, Southeast Asia, Korea?
South Korea is a solid contributor, expected to reach around $324.8 million by 2033. Australia also shows strong gains, nearly doubling its market value too, from $133.6 million in 2021 up to $295.6 million by 2033. That's likely driven by mining, infrastructure, construction down under.
Right.
And the report also specifically highlights growth in the Southeast Asia subregion, so that includes countries like Indonesia, Thailand, Vietnam. Together, they're expected to reach $523.6 million by 2033, up from $240.5 million in 21. So yeah, growth across Asia Pacific is pretty widespread, really fueled by that dynamic economic expansion.
Okay, let's look at Latin America next. What's the story there, according to the report?
For Latin America, the report suggests growth is really being propelled by rising construction activity and expanding plumbing infrastructure specifically.
Makes sense. Which countries are leading that regional growth?
Brazil's the front runner, forecast to grow its market from $483.9 million back in 2021 to nearly $900 million, $892.6 million by 2033.
Quite a jump.
Yeah. Argentina is also a significant player. Its market value is projected to reach $362.8 million in 2033. That's up from around $207.9 million.
And do we see similar upward trends in other major economies there? Colombia, Chile, Peru?
We do. Colombia is expected to see its market grow from $135.5 million to about $264.9 million by 2033. And Peru and Chile actually show particularly strong percentage growth projections.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Peru's market is forecast to more than double, from $64.8 million up to $134.2 million. And Chile is on a similar path, growing from $61 million to $127.9 million. That really suggests significant investment going into infrastructure and building systems in those specific countries.
Interesting. Okay, finally, let's touch on the Middle East and Africa. How does the report characterize growth there?
It's described as more moderate but still steady growth overall.
Any specific drivers mentioned for that region?
Well, the report notes that growth in places like Egypt, which is projected to reach $134.4 million by 2033, up from $104.7 million in 2021, is tied to ongoing infrastructural expansion.
Okay.
Turkey is also highlighted as a key market in the region, seeing growth from $141.3 million up to $204.6 million over the forecast period.
And the rest of the Middle East as a collective?
That segment, grouping other Middle Eastern countries, is forecast to grow from about $97.9 million to $149 million by 2033.
It's worth noting the report doesn't seem to break out specific data for sub-Saharan Africa in this analysis, focusing more on North Africa and the Middle East.
Got it. So, okay, when we pull all these threads together, the global trend, the regional pictures, the country details, what's the big takeaway? Where's this market really heading? Well, I think the overarching story is that this global expansion is fundamentally driven by ongoing industrial upgrades and modernization, especially in plumbing systems, marine engineering, and mechanical engineering sectors, just about everywhere. These aren't fleeting trends. They're tied to basic development needs.
Right. And while the established industrial economies, the U.S., Germany, China, they continue to provide that massive baseline demand.
Exactly. They form the bedrock. But the report clearly flags that countries really hitting their stride with rapid urbanization and infrastructure build-out, places like India, Brazil, those key Southeast Asian nations we mentioned, they are expected to be the most dynamic, the most lucrative growth markets in the coming years.
Because their need for reliable materials for all that new construction and industry is just escalating so quickly.
Precisely.
So there we have it, a pretty thorough dive into the silicon red brass market, a material you might not handle directly very often, but it's clearly foundational. Foundational to global infrastructure, industry, building reliable systems, from massive ships to skyscrapers, right down to the pipes in your home.
It's a really good example, isn't it? How the performance of these specific engineered materials just quietly enables huge global development and keeps critical infrastructure running.
It really is. And thinking about that, this consistent, widespread demand for this one specific alloy across so many different uses in all these rapidly urbanizing places, it does make you wonder, right? What other seemingly niche, maybe high-performance material markets are out there silently shaping our world as it develops so quickly? Something for you to think about.
Okay, so let's dig into this. We've got some really interesting research here focusing on silicon red brass.
That's right. Yeah, it's maybe not a term everyone.
This audio was created with podcastle.ai.
silicon red brass.
That's right. Yeah, it's maybe not a term everyone knows, but it's popping up in some pretty important places.
Mm-hmm. And what we want to do today is really unpack the market for it based on these sources, sort of figure out, what's pushing demand, what's holding it back.
And where it's going.
Exactly. What you really need to know about this particular niche.
And it connects more than you might think to, everyday things like plumbing, infrastructure, even environmental standards.
Okay, so let's start there. Based on the research, what are the big forces pushing silicon red brass forward right now? What's driving demand?
Well, a major one that jumps out from the sources is demand from infrastructure and industrial uses.
Okay.
Places where you absolutely need durability and, crucially, corrosion resistance. Think plumbing, valves, that kind of thing.
Right, so components that are constantly dealing with water faucets, pumps, valve bodies. And the sources mention machinability and disinfection resistance. Why are those such big selling points?
Good question. So machinability just means it's easier for manufacturers to shape it accurately. Less hassle, potentially lower fabrication costs downstream.
Got it.
And disinfection, that's a real problem with some brasses. Basically, the zinc leaches out, leaves behind this weak, porous copper structure. Not what you want in your water pipes.
No, definitely not. Leads to leaks, failures.
Exactly. Silicon red brass resists that much better, so
Yeah.
it means longer life, more reliability for those parts.
Which makes total sense for infrastructure. And you mentioned global shifts earlier. This ties into the lead-free push, doesn't it?
Absolutely. That's a huge driver highlighted in the research.
Yeah.
You've got regulations like NSM and I-61, California DB 1953. They're all pushing for less lead in drinking water systems.
For health reasons, obviously.
Right. Traditional brass often has lead added. Silicon red brass gives you a lead-free option that still performs well, hitting those green building codes and updated standards.
And it's not only fresh water, is it? The marine industry seems to be a significant user, too, according to the articles.
Yeah, the sources definitely point to growth there. Its strength against corrosion, especially in salt water, is a major plus.
So ships, propellers, coastal hardware.
Mm-hmm. Places like the U.S., Japan, Germany, key naval, and offshore hubs are reportedly using it more.
Okay, so performance, regulations, environmental factors, clear drivers. But what about the hurdles? What's making adoption maybe slower than it could be?
Well, the most consistent point across the sources seems to be the cost. It generally has a higher production cost than conventional brass alloys.
And why is that? Is it the raw materials, the process?
It seems to be a bit of both. The specific mix of materials and needing really tight control during casting to ensure you get those desired properties, but that complexity adds cost.
Right, which may make it a harder choice, especially if you're very price sensitive.
It's exactly. Or for maybe smaller manufacturers, or in regions where upfront cost is just the dominant factor.
Does that tie into awareness too? Is it just less well known in some places?
Yeah, that's another challenge the research brings up, limited awareness of its benefits, particularly noted in some developing markets. Southeast Asia, parts of Africa.
Traditional brass is familiar, maybe cheaper initially.
Right. The long-term benefits might not outweigh the initial price tag or the comfort with existing materials.
And there was mention of supply chain issues as well, volatility.
Yes. Prices for copper and silicon can fluctuate, as you know. Plus, there aren't a huge number of foundries worldwide set up for the high-purity versions needed for some critical uses.
Okay, so that can create bottlenecks, price swings. It adds uncertainty.
Precisely.
So strong pluses, but definite challenges with cost and market reach. Given that, where are things heading? Any interesting trends emerging from the research?
One really interesting area is its use in smart water meters. As utilities go digital, they need meter housings that are durable and meet those health standards we talked about. Yeah. Silicon red brass fits the bill. We're seeing reports of it being adopted, especially in city upgrades in places like the U.S. and Western Europe.
Integrating with smart tech.
Yeah.
It's a key growth area. Anything else?
There's also work being done on optimizing it further, making it even easier to machine, improving recyclability.
Right.
Fine-tuning the alloy, maybe adjusting silicon content slightly to boost sustainability. That fits with the whole circular economy idea, keeping materials in use longer.
And one last point the sources seem to emphasize was collaboration.
Yes, partnerships, OEM partnerships,
Yeah.
original equipment manufacturers.
Yeah.
Seeing more of that in sectors like HVAC, marine.
Where they work together to create specific versions.
Exactly. Custom casting for application-specific alloys.
Yeah.
Getting tailored performance, making sure it meets very specific durability or regulatory needs.
Okay, so let's try and summarize the key takeaways from this deep dive. Silicon red brass is definitely growing, yeah. Driven mostly by regulations demanding lead-free options and its inherent strengths, corrosion resistance, machinability.
Right. Performance and compliance are big drivers, but it faces headwinds, mainly the higher initial cost compared to standard brass, and maybe just not being as well known or easily sourced everywhere.
Supply chain complexities, too.
Mm-hmm.
But the future looks like integration with smart tech, like those water meters, a push for even better sustainability, and innovation coming from these tailored industry partnerships.
So why should you, the listener, care about one specific type of brass? Well, because it connects directly to the safety of your water, the resilience of our infrastructure.
And it's a window into how material science is adapting to new demands.
Exactly. It really shows how material choices are evolving.
So maybe a final thought to leave you with. Think about how this focus on very specific material properties pushed by regulations, enabled by tech like smart meters, is changing how whole industries operate globally. It's becoming about more than just performance. It's compliance, sustainability, connectivity, all wrapped up together.
This audio was created with Podcastle.ai.